understand me a lot more, and I can actually also seek to understand other people as well, and I get to understand myself a lot more, and through that you actually begin to build even stronger relationships. You begin to actually have like there's reality, and there's a lot of openness, and there's a lot of honesty when there's that level of vulnerability and that level of openness. And when you're talking about growing a community of people that's mutually responsive and mutually loving towards each other, creating an atmosphere that makes that possible to talk about those things in an open sense, as opposed to, you know, just having conversations with people that are discipling you, but actually rather in a corporate way with everybody to say, hey, these are the things that I'm going through, these are the things that I'm dealing with, to create an environment that promotes that. I think that will create a great deal of safety and a great deal of growth as well across the board with all of us, because we sort of would be stretched in areas that we wouldn't have been stretched previously. Like I know for myself, having, you know, the last 2 weeks, I understand things differently and I think about things differently. So that requires a different level of approach to a lot of things than what I had previously. So I think having that openness would be great. And also it allows people to actually to step more into other people's lives as well, because now you understand. You're no longer just saying, well, I'll leave it to you to be able to do this, because now you actually understand that other people just have a great deal of difficulty in doing that, but you won't have the same level of difficulty as they have. So you can actually step into their life more and more, and the more you do that, the more appreciated and valued they get, and the more those relationships actually grow. So going forward, I think it's definitely, especially for nights like this, it's a great opportunity to actually be able to share about things and talk about things that, you know, you're saying, hey, I want to be invested with this group of people, and in doing that, I want people to be able to know and understand me and actually know the reality of my life and the difficulties that I may have in relationships, so we can actually all grow together and develop even stronger and better relationships going forward. That's my thoughts. So what's anyone else's thoughts on, I guess, sort of carrying on from the last 2 Tuesdays?
From what you just said, I think this is where we are starting to realize that the 51 one another's are starting to, you know, be put in practice, in terms of like when we're starting to, you know, to see how other people live their lives and the struggles that they face, and then we're becoming considerate, we're becoming more loving, instead of, you know, I guess wanting to, you know, have the one size fits all, you know, to fit all, you know, with everybody, but we're starting to, you know, love one another, appreciate one another, consider one another, and bear with one another as we all grow together, you know, differently. We start to realize that, you know, even though one person might be a little bit ahead, and the others are still following, we get to have, I guess, that consideration and the patience to actually see the Lord working through them, and then we encourage one another in that sense.
I think the other important thing as well is like, as well as really understanding yourself, in regards to the fact that like, if you don't understand yourself, you don't understand what drives you to do this, or what makes you to, why you have this fear, or why there's this anxiety, and like you sort of think you do understand yourself, but it's kind of like there's always more to understand about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's kind of in a way, it is caring. I guess it's caring for your own soul, and when you're doing that, you're actually, I guess, caring for others as well. Because it's like I'm actually understanding myself, so I know what my motives are, why I'm doing this or why I'm doing that, what makes me be like this around this person, what makes me behave around this like this person, and why am I scared of this, or why does this make me do this, or whatever. And so it is sort of that thing of, and it gives you a different perspective too, because it's like you can look, if you've got a lot of stuff that you're going through, or the stuff that you're hiding, you see things from a very different view. But it's kind of like, I guess, keeping your eyes on the Lord and continuing to let Him show you. It gives you not only a different perspective of yourself, but a different perspective of others, and the view, I guess, God would see them as well. In regards to the fact it's like, I guess caring. The more you sort of care for your own soul, the more you can sort of care about understanding yourself. It's like I can actually care for others as well, and actually want the best for them, no matter what. And that comes down, I think, to also guarding. I mean, it's tied in with guarding your heart, I guess, as well. Really just, keeping your eyes on the Lord, but also guarding your heart from reaction, from offence, because I know I found for myself that those things really creep in very easily, and it's kind of like it just stops you from. It can very quickly give you unhealthy views of things or other people, and it just like becomes selfish. But you start to have like a reaction, or you start to have an offence, or you start to have whatever, or expectations or whatever. And so I think that's really important as well, is continuing to understand yourself, continuing to care for your own soul, so that because if you don't understand yourself, then it's like, how am I going to really care for others? You know, that's just a thought I had. But
That's good. I think one of the things that I sort of picked up, things I have learned is, I think sometimes relationally, when you interact with other people, it's quite healthy to take things at face value sometimes. It's like there are benefits to it. The benefits to take things at face value. Actually listening to what other people are saying, but not going into, your own thoughts and your own opinions, and going down into the judgment side of things. Because I sort of picked this up within myself as someone is actually saying something to me, as someone is actually trying to connect to me. There's a part of me that sort of does this unconsciously, and I'm sure like I'm not the only one, but it's like we do this unconsciously at times, that someone would be saying one thing, but a part of you sort of interpret that differently, and that doesn't have to be judgment. It only takes a little bit of misinterpretation for that to lead to a high expectation of what someone should be doing, and that which ultimately leads to judgment, even to comparison to some degree. So listening to, I guess it comes down to listening to someone and seeing the benefits of taking things at face value, because sometimes you find that people, when you take things at face values and seeing the benefits of it, you do start to realize that you do start to understand that person from their point of view, and you can actually start to see, oh, okay, this is what the Lord had been showing this person, or this is what this person is going through, and then you embrace that, you appreciate that, and then it's just simply embracing and accepting it, and not leaning onto your own understanding. And a lot of this, I say this from my personal sort of perspective, but I do think that this is how high expectation of someone else and judgment and comparison comes from. This sort of mental attitude sort of leads to that. But if we do sort of just accept that person and what they say at face value, it does actually stops you there, cuts you off there in a sense, and then and then you just go, oh, okay, that's cool, you know, that's what the Lord's been showing you. This is what you're learning in that sense. And that had helped me tremendously in not only in understanding people, but in learning to listen to people as well. So I just thought that would help. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you can learn, if you listen to people, you can learn from anybody. Everybody's got, anybody knows something that you don't know. You know, like, I mean, a lot of times you get to the attitude where humans probably think you know the things that you need to know. You know, but once you start to listen to people, you know, everybody's got something to teach you. From their life experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, humility and teachability.
That's right.
They're like, oh gosh, just 2 words. Humility, teachability.
Yeah.
Which is a bit what Ham was talking about, yeah. Cool. Throw the mic to somebody else. I'm in the hot seat right now.
Well, like, I mean, if anyone's sort of got thoughts that aren't, you know, necessarily relating to like the last Tuesdays, but you know, Patricia, your chance, you've been at home on these Tuesdays, you must have some thoughts that I have an opportunity. Oh well.
Oh yeah.
Well.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, it's just too much at the moment, which, like, every time I'm watching, I would like to say something, but now it's just too much to think of at once. But I have to say, when Melody shared first time, and then Jill was following, it just helped me so much to get to know them.
Yeah.
Even though, because as a family, sometimes I don't want to say struggle, but it's sort of more difficult to connect with people in a way that we would spend time together. And it really helped me, like Melody and Judy, like, you know, I would not know they're going through all these struggles, and by them making themselves vulnerable and sharing all the weaknesses or sort of struggle that they have, it really helped me to understand. And I just have to say, understand in a way that I was so glad that I know who they are now. So if they do have struggle, I don't really feel like judging them for these things, because I know who they are. So yeah, I think that judgment is actually not there. And like, it's not that it has been before. I'm not saying that I was judging Melody or Judy before, but it just helps me to sort of like, I know who you are. I know, like, okay, this is not easy for you, and that's okay, because I know it's not easy for you. So yeah, that was really helpful when they shared. But I guess everybody felt the same about when they shared, like, oh, I know, now I know you, thank you for telling me. So that was good. Yeah.
It's easy to assume you know someone, and then it's like you know, Mel or someone in there with Judy, and it's like, oh, well, okay. It's like, wow, okay. It's like, I don't really know you at all. It's like that whole thing of, like that healthiness of understanding people and knowing, because you can just assume. I guess you can assume that they're going. You can assume they're going through this, or you can assume they're doing this, but it's just like. Different. I guess that both of them was like, wow, okay, I didn't know you were going through this type of thing. And it sort of gives you a very different perspective on how you sort of, I think how you go about not treating them, but like you sort of understand them a whole lot better than what you did.
Yes,
and that allows you to sort of grow in love for them, but like know what it is, and know that they actually, I guess not assume. I'm sure there's be quite a few of us that sort of assume we know this person or assume we know that person, but and so I think sometimes it can be definitely be a scary thing sometimes to sort of really open up and really be like, oh, okay. But at the same time, like, I'm sure it does. It's kind of like that whole thing of bringing something into the light, and it's like, oh, it just feels like a weight has just come off your shoulders, and And I guess that, you know, it's kind of like that whole safety thing, but realizing that I guess the devil would want us to sort of hide everything and hide it in the dark. And I mean, like, it's not, you know, there's obviously boundaries to that, but it's like that whole thing, you know, I feel safe, and I don't want to hide these things, but I actually want people to truly understand me, and I'm okay with that. And, you know, some people will be easy, and then some people will be easier than others, but it's like that whole thing of actually, it does truly set you free in a way. It's kind of like dealing with your identity in a way. It's like it actually does truly set you free, because it's like the stuff that you're hiding, it's like, oh, the Lord doesn't necessarily want you to hold on to that, but it's like this is what He truly wants to set you free from. And it's like when you do bring it into the light, it's like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm really truly free of this, you know. And so, but yeah,
It's like when you break something when you're a child.
yeah,
That's how you care it.
yeah,
When you show me and tell them, it's
Yeah.
like bad.
I've had lots of those.
I've been no experience.
Zipa, were you watching?
I guess also, just on that subject, like,
Yeah.
especially the younger generation, I guess, like the Facebook generation, all of that, I guess, I think most probably a lot of people have got all of these kind of pressure on them. Like, it's like everybody's living this Facebook kind of life, Instagram life. I don't know, but not bad with you guys, but you know, I think that is becoming more and more a thing, is where, you know, you don't want to deal with bad things anymore in life. You know, you don't get the opportunities to as much share because like people want to see you on vacation and like that. So, you know, that's something like I'm scared of for my kids, you know, that kind of environment where they grow up.
Sorry, again, just one word. I'm just thinking out loud.
Kidding around here.
So just adding on to what Jeremy was saying, I guess. It's like, you know, like if anyone wants to share, like go ahead, because
Oh my god.
feel free to. I think it's like adding on to what Jeremy was saying before. It's like it's very much. I think this can be. It can be like one of those things in our journey, like a pivotal point for us. You know, in that we embrace this way of living, in that we understand people. That can be a way of life. And in that, I think I sort of shared this with a couple of people before, but it's like the revelation I had was, if I do embrace understanding someone as a way of life, then that kind of really removes a lot of the things like expectations and things like that from my point of view and from my standpoint. I was sort of listening to Melody and Judy, and then I was like, wow, I had no idea they'd gone through this. And then that's sort of vulnerability and their courage sort of, you know, draw something out of me. Like it's I guess it's love and care for those sort of weaknesses, and it draws something out of me, and it made me sort of realize, wow, okay, you cannot actually fully understand someone unless you're them. So it's not good to assume. Now that I see their weaknesses, and I want to fully understand them, and I fully want that to be my way of life. You know, understanding that person. You know, I'm fully in. You know, for this individual, I'm fully in for this individual, and I guess it's much like in the context of community, it sort of shares similarity as well, in that, you know, You want to go somewhere with the community. You want to build something great, and so you throw yourself in there. And it's just like I'm ready to be. I'm in. I'm 100%. I'm ready to be betrayed. I'm ready to put all my trust there. I'm ready to be hurt. I'm ready to cry. That sort of thing. So that is also.
Like you're willing to take risks.
Yeah. It's like a commitment. It's like a commitment.
It's not like you want to be betrayed. Like
Yes.
I'm ready to betray you.
No, not like that. Not like that.
Take it now.
It's like a devotion
Yeah.
sort of thing, and that had helped tremendously. And just leaving this space in your heart. It's like you cut out this space and then you sort of like leave that for someone. If that makes any sense. No, that doesn't make any sense.
Or you're making space for them, for their
Yeah,
mistakes,
yeah.
and you're willing to understand them and accept them, even though they're different from you.
Yeah.
You're still willing to accept
Yeah,
them.
and just like making that space in your heart to accept or ready to embrace the part of that person that you don't know yet.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you sort of your head, in your mind and in your heart, you're already in that posture of humility, and you're ready to embrace whatever the part that that person is not haven't told you about yet. So it's just positioning yourself in humility, I guess, to simplify it.
Okay, question. Do you think that's a skill that is natural, a skill to be learned, or do you think everybody can just click into that, or do you think some people would find what you're talking about difficult to do because
Yes.
generally their inclination is to not be so loving and accepting?
Okay, I think that's a really good question. I never thought about that before, but now you have asked me that question. I think it doesn't come naturally. It definitely didn't come naturally to me until I heard Melody and Judy. Didn't come naturally to me at all. In fact, when I heard that, it gave me like a shock, like a punch in the gut sort of thing, like a wake up call. And then I was on my journey to sort of really try to understand people, but I don't think it does come naturally. I think it is something we all need to learn in a sense.
I think it's a good opportunity for people who find it a struggle to just naturally openly accept someone. I think for some people it's a natural ability, other people it's just hard effort to see someone and go, oh, I don't like you. But then the Bible does say be holy because God is holy. So what that does actually mean is I have to do something. I have to make a decision and a choice within my heart, within my head, even though all inclinations are to say run or don't take the risk. It's an opportunity to walk in the spirit as opposed to walking in the flesh. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So it is
yeah.
having to get down deep, I think, anyway, for those who do find it not as easy or who haven't yet learnt that or haven't got that conviction yet, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Because it is a decision. Yeah, because I was just going to say, like, listening to you talk, and you're like speaking of a predetermined decision in the heart to basically agree with God on what He says about that person and to love them just in spite of what you don't know about them, in spite of what might come up. You're talking about commitment, and it's like that's a pretty deep level of commitment, and I don't know I struggle to think of that coming naturally to anyone. Do you know what I mean? Because it's such a especially in like our culture, where like in the Western culture where your connections are based on what's convenient,
and what works. And when people, you know, like we're like, it's not natural for us to turn the other cheek. It's not natural for us to bless those who curse us. Or like to forgive wrongs and to do good and overcome evil with good. Because that's where that's kind of leading. Do you know what I mean? Like making that commitment to someone, in that I'm going to love you in spite of what might come, and whatever that looks like, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to choose to do that and walk in the Spirit, even though I don't necessarily want to do that, and that doesn't come naturally to me. Yeah, it would definitely be a decision.
Yeah, like what you're talking about is awesome because it represents godliness. It represents integrity of character. Like before the Lord, forget about other people, but it does it bless other people? Absolutely. And is it for the greater good of many? Yes. But ultimately, your heart needs to have that integrity before the Lord, which is what you're talking about. And I think ultimately that's what walking in the Spirit actually is. It's just before God, before you and God, in front of men and women, you have that heart that's open. That's ideally what we want. It's not easy though to do because of our own inclinations and our past and whatever. So it is more so a prayer that I reckon it's that prayer going, God, I'm not loving, or God, I'm not willingly opening my heart to this particular person, or God, I notice that within me I'm not accepting this person, could you please help me? And from there it will be, I think, just a beautiful thing how we can eventually have a safe community where we can open up and share. So yeah, I just think that not all people will find it easy to just accept people, or find it easy to love people, or whatever. It is a struggle for many. It is a skill, a conviction, I don't know, an attribute, a godly attribute that God puts onto you as you grow. I don't know, open that up for discussion. But if a lot of people find out what Chris is saying, what we're talking about, I struggle with that. It's a true genuine struggle.
Well, I think like most of the things we tend to have, like purely from a personal understanding, we tend to have a very rigid and a very structured way of how we do things, and how we do things and how we understand things. So therefore, naturally, we would expect everybody to fit within that very rigid and structured way of doing life. And then that makes it easy to accept and love people that can fit in with that. And obviously, like, not everyone will, but there'll be some that actually will be pretty close to fitting with that. So therefore you can actually tolerate that and say, well, you're not quite fitting in with the structure that I have in place, but it's close enough that I can actually bear with the fact that you're not quite in there. But then there's other people that will be vastly different to how you do things. They will think differently, they will understand things differently, they will communicate differently. So their whole life is like completely different to how you see things and how you view things. So the natural thing isn't to sort of, and it's not like you don't sort of love those people, accept them. It's more your natural inclination is, oh, okay, you need to change, or you need to grow, or you need to learn. But that definition is based purely on the fact that you just want them to be like this. So it's not really about...
You're the one who needs to change.
Well, it's not necessarily anyone really needs to change. I think it's more the fact that there has to be consideration of people. But it's until like you sort of realize and understand that the growth and the development that we expect from people isn't actually for their good, but it's more so for people to fit in with what we want them to fit into. So therefore, they make our life easy, where we no longer have to do what Chris is talking about. So I'm no longer having to stretch myself to love people that are doing things differently to me because now they're exactly the same as me. I'm no longer having to be understanding. I'm no longer having to be considerate because how everyone is doing life fits in perfectly to how I've imagined things to be like. But when there's, when there are those differences in place, when there are those, different personalities, different traits, different ways of doing life, it does require a very conscious decision to actually love and care and consider those people. So it's no longer a natural thing to do it. It actually is a very conscious and thought out choice to say, okay, I am actually going to consider this person. I'm actually going to love this person. I'm actually going to prefer that person. So it's not just like a natural thing where you're going to say, well, I'm just going to feel that way. So I think, like what I was sort of, I guess, to summarize with that is it's understanding, or at least trying to understand ourselves in terms of what are the sort of structures that we have in place where we would generally want everyone to fit into them. So whether it's, understanding what, commitment looks like. So like, our definition of what commitment looks like could be very different across the board, or understanding what responsibility looks like, or understanding what involvement looks like, or understanding what, a community of people actually looks like, or understanding what relationships look like. So all of these things is like one word that defines all of them, but because there's such differences in characters, such differences in understanding life, our actual definition of all those different words are vastly different, and therefore we think a certain way and we do things a certain way, and then our expectation is that every single person has to fit in with what we think or how we understand it. And when they don't, that's when there's that inclination where other people need to grow, or other people just need to, you know what I mean? So it's just being able to be aware of those things within ourselves in terms of how we actually understand these different aspects, and then see, okay, can we then actually have a great deal of flexibility and have a great deal of humility as well in that, to actually say, just because I think this way, because I understand things this way, it doesn't make that the absolute truth of how things have to be. So there's that humility to be able to say, well, somebody else understands things this way and they do things that way. So, and you don't necessarily have to fully agree with that, but it doesn't make that person wrong where you're saying, well, you need to grow and understand things like me, but it's actually having the humility to actually be considerate for that person, actually be understanding to that person. So it's because ultimately I think that's how you grow anyway. Like any group of people, is there's going to be differences in how we understand things, and that difference is what forms the one. It's not necessarily the same understanding or the same way of saying, this is what I think, therefore everyone needs to think this way. So I think as long as there's a very so I think, as long as there's a well-defined and a very clear understanding of what our main purpose of life is individually, and sort of coming together corporately, understanding the main purpose of life, I think those differences in other aspects, they're things that we just have to be able to learn to bear with one another, to be able to love one another, to be able to be considerate and understanding towards basically everybody. So I think that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's easy to have expectations. Like when people are like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm growing this way. People need to get up this way as well.
That's right.
And like Tracy was saying earlier, it's like that whole thing of loving one another. And it's like, it's like that's how we grow. It's kind of like, what I mean? It's like being considerate of that other person, like you were saying. That's why it's like 60 or 59 or whatever it is. Love one another's in the New Testament. It's like definitely Lord Jesus people love us.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, and it's also always seen as an opportunity for us to grow as well, not so much for the other person to get their act together.
You need to change.
Really
You need to get on my level, man.
It's not necessarily that. It's like you just really need to get your act together and make my life easy. I don't know. No, I'm the only one that thinks that way.
I don't think anyone else will admit to that.
Yeah, we're all guilty.
I'm a perfect person.
Guilty.
Very humble.
And the size enough.
I probably just like to recognise, I think, that doesn't need to be so close. That these sort of lessons and things that we're finding aren't really new. I think it's been something that has probably been relevant to our community since its conception. But I'm really, really glad and keen to see that it seems really relevant to everyone at a deeper level as we continue, and I don't think it will ever kind of waver off or fade out ever. So I think like if you're in it for the long haul, like I'm in it for the long haul, like I'm really keen to see how this year will go, if that makes sense, and to kind of keep going and learn how to love one another.
Can we close the chapter on this and open it again next year?
This time next year. In 1 year. Progress report.
That's it.
There's definitely a lot to learn and understand everyone, learn to grow, like with God's grace, and understand each other. And sometimes when people like Mabel and Judy came up, they had the guts to explain themselves, how they feel, and other people were like, oh, okay. And then it is eye-opener, like we need to understand people. It's not about us only, I think this is the best way to grow in this community, by understanding them and by learning from them and appreciate them, like, yes, like you've done the right thing and this is where we can do something about it, and it's not, so by putting yourself in their shoes, and then we can understand better without judging anyone, so I guess that's the right way to do it. So being a part of this community is I have learned a lot and still learning, and I will keep learning, every one of us.
I have a little confession. So, it's in regards of the community. Like, I'm finding it really easy to sort of love people in community. I'm finding it really helpful to understand, of course, when they share their struggles. So that part, I feel like, but that's okay. Like, I accept you exactly the way you are, and it's so easy for me to love you. But my struggle is out of the community. Like, that's my struggle. I'm like, I love everybody in my family because it doesn't matter the way they are. They so do my family. But then out of the community, I find myself like, oh, I can't deal with this person. Oh, I can't deal with that person. I'm judging that person. And I'm like, no, Lord, I know you don't want me to do this. So my struggle really is like, within the community, I don't feel like I would be judgmental or not accepting, or it's just so easy to love you guys the way you are. But outside of community, I do really struggle. And I know it's not the right thing to do. That's my struggle. Does anybody feel the same, or is it only me?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, like what you're saying, Petra, is very, very true. Yeah, like, it's, for example, work, people can, if you work with people for so long and then, they do things that annoy you, or they're not taking responsibility, or, those kind of things, they can get in the way, and then you realize that it's so easy to love community because you chose community. Whereas people that you work with, you don't get to choose them.
Yeah.
Your boss, you could quit, but still, wherever you go, you're gonna still find people that you're not choosing to work with. And so that is, that can be hard. And so I have experienced that at work. And then I started to, ask myself, what does it look like to serve just to serve the Lord,
Yeah.
and so it's like, even, and I've noticed like the moment I noticed my pride, getting in the way in the workplace or other environments, that's when I started to ask myself, is this what the Lord would have me do? And then so it's just like, okay, what did Jesus do? Like, he is the king. He could have just gone onto the throne and just sat on the throne and everyone worshipped him there, but then he decided to be a servant. He decided to serve others. He decided to love others, and therefore he did not choose anybody, but like everyone came because he was loving and welcoming to everyone. So it's like, even the people that I work with, especially the elderly, like now I'm starting to treat them like more like the way I would treat my parents, the way I would treat people in the community, even though they still bring that that thing within your heart where you're just like, why do they always do that? But it's also realizing that there's probably something within themselves that hasn't been dealt with, that I have maybe I've already dealt with, and now I'm seeing it to the other person, and now I can see how bad it is, and how hurting it is, like on me or on other people. So it's pretty much, I guess, loving people. I think that was Imogen that mentioned, turning the other cheek. So it's just loving without expecting any love back, and just, I guess, allowing the Lord to actually work within each person's heart. And so this is a really, I guess, a good journey that we're going, through, where we're pursuing a path to holiness, where we're allowing the Lord to actually be within us, to be, to allow that change to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd definitely say something. I did actually have a thought, but then it was just distracting me. But I was on a slightly different note, and just to bring it back to the big picture, I was listening to an audiobook which is called Eternity to Hear, and it's by Frank Viola. So the same guy who wrote Reimagining Church. And just to put all of the stuff that we're all learning in context, is that, like, I've just gotten to the part where he's talked about how God is homeless and God wants a house and God's building a house. And the building blocks he's using are people. And the Bible often describes us, like believers, as living stones that he's bringing together. And so the choice to love and the choice to make allowance for faults and to love is like kind of like I guess the glue in between that. But there's like a bigger purpose other than being holiness and godliness as a very high purpose. But then the purpose beyond that is that God would have expression and God would rest with us. So, that in like the allowances and the love that we have for one another, God would be amongst us and we would be God's people. Clearly different from the world, because the world doesn't make allowance for other people's wrongs, doesn't really want to persevere when it's annoying or difficult or inconvenient. And so like the goal in all of this and understanding one another and in sharing and being brave to share what we're struggling with is to create God's people and to create God's community in his house. And so everything that I guess we're learning is feeding into that. And learning to love one another is such a big part of that. But, yeah. It's a good book. I would recommend it.
What's it called?
From Eternity to Here. I'm borrowing it from Paul and Rosie. So I've got their copy. Sorry. But the first part is about the bride of Christ. The second part is about the house of God, and then I think the third one might be talking about the body or the family of God. But there's 3 main parts, so that's good. Yeah.
Thank good step here because it's getting a bit pain. That was it.
Okay.
No.
No, okay.